City of Ann Arbor 2018 Sustainable Ann Arbor Forum, Electric Vehicles, co-sponsored by AADL and the City of Ann Arbor.
Before we get going with the presentations, I just wanted to ask how many people here had a chance to check out some of the cars that were parked outside. Oh, that's a great number. And the next question is, how many of you are currently contemplating purchasing an EV for your next car? Okay, good number as well. I know some of you have one, so the next question is, how many of you already own an electric car, or let's say drive one regularly through a car share service? Excellent. Wow, we've got all of those represented well. Okay, well, regardless of whether you own one or not, hopefully you will all come away more informed after tonight's session, and for any of you that were out there still on the fence, perhaps you'll decide to take the plunge after hearing some of the presentations tonight. All right. I am with the Ecology Center, and I trust that many of you here do know about the Ecology Center, but for those of you that don't, we're a nonprofit environmental organization based here in Ann Arbor that works to promote healthy people and a healthy planet. And one of the areas that we work in is addressing energy, trying to reduce energy use, and also addressing the wicked problem of climate change. And for us, that also includes mobility solutions like better access to transit, walking, and biking, but it also means smarter and more efficient vehicles like plug-in electrics. And toward that end, we publish a monthly e-newsletter called Built by Michigan News that hopefully some of you have seen, that features advances on electric vehicles and policies here in the great auto state. And we recently kicked off a regional collaboration that we're calling Charge Up Midwest. It's a partnership with other environmental and clean transportation groups working together to accelerate the adoption of EVs throughout the Midwest region. So we're working closely with a number of other colleagues to try to push this in our region and to make our region more of a leader on electric vehicles. So why do we care about electric vehicles? Well, for one thing, transportation emissions are a big part of the climate problem. In 2016, in fact, transportation-related emissions for the first time exceeded the emissions from electricity production in the United States. That's probably not quite the case in Michigan yet, but it is nationally. And passenger vehicles make up the largest share of those vehicles, but trucks, buses, and other forms of transportation are also important contributors as well. So in short, if we're going to solve the climate crisis, we're going to have to get serious about reducing transportation emissions. Now, the Union of Concerned Scientists has done some of the best work, in our opinion, to evaluate the relative carbon emissions of EVs compared to conventional combustion vehicles. And they've found that even in areas with the most carbon-intensive electricity grid, like Michigan, EVs are still significantly lower in well-to-wheel carbon emissions than their gasoline counterparts. And they'll only get cleaner as the grid continues to emit fewer emissions in the future. In this particular chart, an average EV in Michigan has an emissions profile similar to a high-mileage gasoline or hybrid vehicle, but in other regions with lower carbon grids can achieve an emissions equivalent as high as 90 mile per gallon vehicle. Now, Michigan's electricity grid is already cleaner than it was when this chart was put together based on data from a few years ago. So it's already better than this looks. And a few years ago, we decided to take a look at what it could look like if here in Michigan, if renewables reached as high as 25% of the electricity grid. And I know this slide is quite busy, but the lower band shows the range of hypothetical EV emissions in 2025, depending on the carbon intensity of the grid. And it shows that if Michigan had 25% of renewables in the grid, that an EV could achieve the emissions equivalent of 97 mile per gallon vehicle. And of course, if you're powering your vehicle with 100% renewable energy, as I know many of you do today who might have solar panels on your roof, the emissions are going to be virtually zero. So that's sort of a good overview, I think, of why the emissions are so much better for electric vehicles. Now, reducing emissions aren't the only benefit of EVs, however. Others include fuel savings for consumers due to the cheaper electricity that is used to refuel them, and also lower maintenance costs. There's benefits to the grid and to ratepayers from increasing the utilization of the grid during off-peak hours, since it's very easy for most people to be able to charge at night when there's not much demand on the grid. There's economic benefits from spending the consumer savings on other local goods and services. There's the increased advanced auto jobs here in our auto state. And perhaps best of all, and I know many of you out there can attest to this, they're really fun to drive. I'm sure some of the other speakers on the panel will speak more about some of these benefits. But one chart I wanted to share with you is from a study that we commissioned with a few of our other Charge Up Midwest partners that showed what, if you just took a few of these savings, what those could add up to monetarily. What the study showed is that under a relatively optimistic EV adoption forecast, that the benefits to Michigan drivers, that's the red part, to ratepayers, the blue part, and society in general from the reduction of carbon emissions could realize that could add up to savings of over $30 billion by 2050 in the state. So that doesn't even count some of the other important benefits that I listed on the last slide. So what is Ann Arbor doing to achieve some of the economic benefits of EVs, you may ask? Well, the most important thing is probably the collective effort to implement the city's climate action plan. Adopted back in 2012, the overall goal of the plan is to reduce emissions by 90% across the city by 2050. And one of the 4 areas of the plan includes over 20 activities to reduce transportation-related emissions, with one of those being to increase citywide electric vehicle charging infrastructure. Now, work on these actions has been supported by Ann Arbor staff and a broad range of stakeholders that make up the Ann Arbor Climate Partnership. And there was also a Drive Electric Ann Arbor partnership that was formed to bring additional parties together to promote electric vehicle activities. And while there's been significant progress in some aspects of the plan, including an expanded transit project as part of the Ann Arbor area transportation millage that was passed in 2015, the city has had limited resources to implement other parts of the plan. And it is even more clear today that progress is needed on EV infrastructure. Following the DDA's latest report on the growing use of its downtown charging stations, the good news, according to DDA's Dave Conkle, and I know I saw him here earlier, is that the installation of now some 23 stations in various Ann Arbor parking garages across the downtown area has delivered enough electricity to displace more than 1 million miles of gasoline-fueled travel. That's really big. Yeah, that's good. The bad news, however, is that these 23 stations are getting so much use now that they're getting harder and harder to find to charge. And that can be a really big problem for those who really need it, and will certainly become a disincentive to going electric for many if that's not resolved. Now, fortunately, that could change in the coming year when the city begins collecting revenues from the new County Public Safety and Community Mental Health Ballot Initiative that voters approved this last November. And that's because the Ann Arbor City Council resolved to spend a portion of the funds that will be coming back to Ann Arbor for several of local priorities that include up to $1 million annually for actions to address climate change. So we finally have some resources that appear to be coming available that we can use to help support some of these programs. One of those programs that's been proposed and supported by members of the Ann Arbor Energy and Environmental Commissions, along with the Ann Arbor Climate Partnership, includes a Charge Up Ann Arbor program that would significantly increase the number of EV charging stations available throughout the community, and where possible, powering them by renewable energy, such as, for example, near the stations in the Ann Arbor, the 4th Avenue and Catherine Street lot, where the DDA will soon be adding a solar carport that will offset the energy use from the electric vehicle charging that happens there. So, other targets for these charging stations could be in apartment buildings and workplaces and in other long-dwell shopping areas, destinations throughout the city that can provide more charging options for residents, employees, and others who visit the city. Now, the plan also includes developing new city zoning ordinances that could require new buildings and parking areas to be EV ready, so that it's much less expensive to install stations down the road. It includes an EV group purchase and education program to try to help encourage more people to go electric, and needed work to help the city itself convert its own fleet to EVs. The bottom line is that cities can play a key role in facilitating the transition to transportation electrification. And as I think you'll hear more about from the other speakers, there are a variety of opportunities for the city to partner with its local utility, with automakers and state agencies to increase EV charging options and to increase consumer and institutional awareness about EVs and their benefits to the community and the environment. And just one example of an opportunity are the VW mitigation funds that the state will be managing that include opportunities to both convert older diesel buses and trucks to cleaner vehicles, which could include electric, and also includes money that can be spent on increasing EV infrastructure throughout the state. So let me end there and turn it over to the first of our panel members. We're going to start to my left with Bruce Westlake, who is the president of the Michigan Electric Auto Association. Bruce has been involved in electric vehicles for over 10 years, and along with his wife has owned several electric vehicles, beginning with a 1999 Ford Ranger EV purchased in 2007. Is that from Bill Ford, by the way?
No.
No, okay. I know he used to talk about his Ford Ranger. But for the last year and a half, Bruce and his wife have owned exclusively electric vehicles and currently have a 2016 Tesla Model X, which maybe some of you saw outside, and a Ford Focus EV, which I think was outside as well. Yep. He knows very little about the price of gas, however, and where to buy it, so don't ask him about that. Take it away, Bruce.
Thanks. I want to thank everybody for coming down on a dark and stormy night. So looks like we got a friendly crowd here. So I'm going to start right in. The point of my presentation has to do with why we're all going to be driving electric cars. And I want to give a nod to Tony Sabah. He's written several books and also does presentations that you can pick up on YouTube that deal with the disruption of the marketplace due to several things. including solar energy and electric vehicles. So a little bit about me so you know right away, because we usually have to tell people when we do events that we're not selling anything. We are really all owners that are volunteering. Terry on the board here is also, he shows up at every event. And Charles has also showed up quite a few times.
I'm really hardcore.
He is, yeah. So we just go out and talk to people in cities about what they are going to experience in the time coming up as we change to electric vehicles. And I know this is a scary thing for people who are driving a gas car, changing over to an electric car. You don't know whether you're going to get where you want to go. So I see some heads nodding. So we've been doing this for about 10 years, and we put on about 5 or 6 events a year. This is a picture I want you to take a look at. The little arrow, and then the blow up is the little arrow again. So this is New York City, Easter, 1909. And in that picture, you'll see one vehicle, one gas-powered vehicle, which is under the arrow there. I blew it up as best I could there, but that suffice it to say that there weren't very many gas vehicles at that point. Now, this is the same picture, same area, 4 years later. There's only one horse-drawn vehicle. That's in the space of 4 years. So that gives you kind of an idea of what some of us think is going to happen. Now I want to talk a little bit about Kodak. In 2000, Kodak discovered how to make digital film. And they decided that it was too complicated and too expensive to do anything with that technology. So they sold it. And they sold it to Japanese firms who, within the space of 12 years, put Kodak out of business. So this is the kind of thing we're talking about. We believe that we're on a curve right now. We've seen other countries that have gone up on that curve ahead of us. Norway, for one, is about halfway through the adoption curve right now. They just passed a point where 52% of the vehicles sold are plug-in vehicles. That just happened recently. So these are some of the reasons why we think that electric vehicles are going to be taking over the business. The design of an electric vehicle is much simpler. Electric motors, an electric vehicle uses about 200 parts versus about 1,000 parts for a gas-powered vehicle. There's a lot more complication in a gas vehicle, an electric vehicle. This second point here I want to highlight. It's kind of hard to wrap your mind around it, but if you look at the electricity that goes into a refinery and look at the number of gallons that come back out of the refinery, and you divide the number of kilowatts of energy that are fed into the refinery to produce 1 gallon of gas, that number is somewhere around 7 kilowatts. And I know kilowatts is not
Kilowatt hours?
the kilowatt hours that you may not be familiar with that name or what it means. You can't put it in your hands or know how much it is, but if you take 7 kilowatt hours of power and you put it into Terry's vehicle or you put it into my vehicle, he may be able to travel 28 miles, I may be able to travel 24 miles, but there remains the fact that why should you make that gallon of gas if I can just put it right into my tank? That 24 number is kind of a magic number too. That happens to be the average of a gas vehicle built in the U.S. today is 24 miles per gallon. So we're just ignoring all of the other things that go along with digging oil out of the ground, transporting it, all those other things. If you just look at how much energy it takes to refine a gallon of gas, that's how much energy you need to drive an electric car the same distance. So kind of try and wrap your mind around that, that idea, and that'll help you decide, why this is going to happen pretty soon. So in addition to that, there's a lot of other reasons why you might want to drive an electric car. Electric costs are stable, and they rise on a pretty regular angle. It's pretty predictable. They go up and they're restricted by law. Gas prices can be anything. So you know how much it's going to cost you to fuel your vehicle. And we can say that electricity is, by definition, a domestic product. Any electricity you pull out of your plug at home came from this continent. I'm not going to say it came from the U.S. because a lot of it goes across the river, but it came from this continent. It didn't come from overseas. It is a domestic product, and people who are employed in that business are your neighbors. The new vehicles that are entering the market right now are competitive in price. We just had a Tesla Model 3 go through town last week. They're starting to hit the road. Probably a lot of you, I've talked to a lot of people that have been reading the articles about the Model 3. They are ramping up pretty fast right now, and we're going to see a whole lot more of those coming up soon.
You can buy a Bolt right now.
Yes, you can. I don't mean to.
It's all right. There's one outside. I can be a commercial too.
Yeah. So this chart is very similar to what Charles had, and it shows the curve that matches how we're seeing cars being launched in the country. And this is just up to 2014, and I purposely used this chart because I couldn't find a later one. But anyway, if you take a chart that's later than this, it goes to 2017, it's going to be the same curve, and you're going to see the same adoption. And if you plot Norway on a curve like this, they're just further along the same curve. So it doesn't seem to go back at all. It's on a forward motion.
Exponential.
Exponential, yep. So this will give you a kind of an idea of how many electric vehicles are built compared to gasoline vehicles right now. So the chart on the right, the green bar, are all of the electric vehicles made right now, and the other bars are the vehicles that are being sold right now, and the Ford F-Series, probably everybody knows, is number one. Silverado is sneaking up right behind it, and they're almost there, right? Anyway, there's 3 pickups right there on the top. So that'll give you an idea how many electric vehicles. It's a small percentage right now. And then the chart on the left, the green bars, the dark green bars are all electric vehicles. The other ones are plug-in hybrids. And those are the sale numbers for the current sale numbers as of June 2017 of each one of those vehicles. So there's another piece, and everybody is talking about this. People that come up to us ask questions about autonomous vehicles because it seems to go hand in hand. So this is just a chart. It shows you that they have decided that there are 5 levels of autonomy. The 5th one being you don't need to be in the driver's seat anymore. There doesn't need to be a steering wheel. Nobody is there right now except for test cars. Currently, there are several cars that are falling around 2 and 3. And you may not know that you have a partially autonomous car right now. If you have warnings that you're leaving a lane, or if you have adaptive cruise control, you have portions of autonomous driving vehicle software. Semi-autonomous features, like where we are in between 2 and 3, have been shown to reduce accidents by about 50%. I'm not going to say any more about that. And then there's another piece. A lot of people who own electric vehicles choose to put solar in, and it's nobody seems to know why there's such a close correlation there. But I plotted a red line down there to show what the normal installation of solar is, and the rest of these blue lines are EV owners. They'll give you a kind of a relative idea of how it's being used. There's two basic ways of looking at building electric cars. Some manufacturers wait until they've got a perfected car probably because of legal reasons, and others like Tesla are putting things out that some people may believe are not fully vetted. It's just two different ways of looking at the same thing. Current manufacturers have got their own vehicle lines that they have to support. That gives a kind of a benefit to companies that are starting building only electric vehicles. They don't have to support old lines, so they have a little extra help. So you may ask why you would care about this. Why does it make any difference to you? In Michigan, we have several manufacturing, not as many as before, but we have some. We have some research facilities, and some of them are currently expanding. And there are research grants to U of M that we depend on. Countries like China are mandating that they change to electric vehicles within short length of time. We have France, Norway, and Sweden have already set deadlines. And what can you do about it? So I would suggest everybody think about things that show up in the news and whether it's real news, whether there's any basis for what's being said. And if you want to know something about electric vehicles, you can drive a Maven over here. Or there's another company called Turo that rents vehicles. It's a good idea if you're off on vacation sometime, just go rent an electric vehicle and see what it's like. That's the best way to find out what it's like. And there's my contact information for anybody who's interested. I can pass out a card. And thank you all for your attention.
All right, thanks, Bruce. We're going to now turn it over to Andrew Renz. He's the member of the new product and service development team within electric marketing at DTE Energy. Prior to joining DTE, Andrew led a capital markets technology development team at Quicken Loans for over 4 years and has previous experience in program management and software implementation and consulting. Andrew received his MBA from the Ross School of Business at the University of Michigan. Take it away, Andrew.
Thank you. So thank you, Charles. Thank you to the city and the library for hosting this event. So I want to take this opportunity to talk a little bit about the electric vehicle market in general, charging infrastructure in Michigan, and then I'd really like to talk about some of the ways that we think utilities can help increase the rate of EV adoption and some of the things that we're currently working on at DTE. So looking at the chart here, you can see that, and again, these lines represent a variety of forecasts for electric vehicle sales looking out to 2025. And again, they all paint a slightly different picture, but the important takeaway for me here is that, again, as Bruce mentioned, this is something that is coming. Ideally, we want to be a little further along on the adoption curve, but Again, growth is coming, and it will continue to come in the years to come. So with the wider adoption of electric vehicles, again, we're going to see a number of benefits to a variety of stakeholders. The vehicle owner realizes decreased operating costs through lower fuel and maintenance costs, along with greater stability in fuel price, as electricity prices tend to fluctuate significantly less than gas and diesel fuel, as Bruce mentioned as well. So at significant levels of adoption, the load growth or increased electricity usage will actually start to provide affordability benefits as well. So utility customers will potentially experience either lower prices or slowed increases in prices because, again, as utilities invest in updating infrastructure and increasing renewable and natural gas generation, again, this increased consumption will be important to help offset the potential for rate increases associated with those activities. At the societal level, we all then benefit from reduced CO2 emissions, greater energy independency, and increased benefit to the local economy. So again, filling up with electricity generated in large part here in Michigan helps keep a greater portion of your household energy spend in-state as opposed to out-of-state or potentially out-of-country. And so for these reasons and a variety of others, DT, we're really interested in what can be done to help pull the adoption curve forward on electric vehicles. So one of the areas where improvement's really necessary to facilitate higher levels of adoption is the availability of charging infrastructure. So if you look at a couple of different recommendations represented in the table here, as far as the number of chargers necessary to adequately support current and future levels of EV adoption, it's easy to see that there's a gap to be filled, even in comparison to the most conservative recommendations. And the increased availability of DC fast charging is seen as a key way to alleviate range anxiety. But there's also a major role for level 2 charging to play. So when I say level 2, I'm referring to the types of chargers that would require like a 240 volt outlet to power. The availability of level 2 charging significantly increases the convenience and feasibility of EV ownership. So for me personally, I live here in Ann Arbor and I work in downtown Detroit. So that's a 40-mile commute, 80 miles round trip. So with the electric vehicles that are being sold today, I could potentially get all the charging that I need at the workplace and never even have to plug in at home. If I owned a battery EV with a range of only 100 miles, if we didn't have charging at work, I'd potentially be a little anxious about running out of fuel. So again, it's really important that, again, workplace charging really expands significantly. Another big opportunity for level 2 charging is with multi-unit dwellings or apartment complexes. Residents likely won't have the ability to charge their EV unless the complex itself puts in charging. Similarly, single-family homes in areas where there's only on-street parking present a similar challenge. So again, coming up with solutions to these challenges are things that we really see as valuable in getting us further along on that adoption curve. So again, as both DC fast charging and level 2 charging become more widely available and visible, this will really help to break down the concerns preventing a lot of buyers from making the switch to an EV. All right, so next we want to talk a little bit about why, again, it makes sense for utilities to play an active role in increasing adoption and some of the ways that can take place. So again, we really think that utilities are well suited to participate in EV adoption for a number of reasons. One, the cost associated with deploying charging infrastructure can be significant, especially when we're talking about DC fast charging. Utilities can provide guidance on where charging can be installed to align with existing system capacity, which can significantly reduce the cost of connection. When I say that DC fast charging can be expensive or complex, the load associated with a fast charging station can be roughly on par with that of say a Meijer grocery store. So again, for something that's very small, and in its physical presence, it puts a pretty significant demand on the system. So when you think about deciding where to place a station like that, if you're looking at a highway and you have the option to put it at one exit versus another, if there's existing capacity on a circuit at one exit and the other is maxed out, the cost associated with that installation can be drastic between the two. So again, that's where we really look to engage with those that are looking to put charging sites in place and provide as much guidance as we can to help minimize the costs associated with that. It's imperative that we as utilities understand the impacts of widespread transportation electrification in order to mitigate impacts on the infrastructure. And again, utilities are well suited to participate in and lead pilot programs to learn about the impacts associated with the integration of new technologies, whether it's faster charging or the integration of battery storage along with charging. Now, utilities are already engaged in energy-related policy discussions, so the more we can understand about transportation electrification, the better suited we'll be to positively impact the outcome. So again, we really feel that utilities and DTE more specifically can help move the needle on electric vehicle adoption. There's a number of things that we're considering here in this list. As far as things that DTE is actively working on right now, we're going to completely revamp our electric vehicle websites, both on the residential and business side, to, again, provide intuitive information and interactive tools, both for potential EV owners and current EV drivers to help, again, provide guidance on what type of charging makes the most sense for you. In addition to that, with the number of rate options that we have, what rate makes the most sense, or again, will provide you the most savings depending upon how you intend to charge or other activities that you have taking place in the home. In conjunction with that, we hope to execute a number of educational campaigns, again, to help provide the same information through other channels and help make sure that dealerships, sales staff, and just consumers at large are aware of these resources. We're partnering with the City of Detroit on their 2018 Mobility Initiative. So DTE has a leadership presence on the venture board to participate in immersion sessions to design and shape Detroit's future mobility strategy. We continue to engage with municipalities and developers. So we're constantly having discussions with cities such as Ann Arbor, Birmingham, Plymouth, et cetera, to identify gaps in charging infrastructure needs and potential opportunities for pilots and partnerships. And again, also investigating partnership opportunities with developers to encourage charging deployment at their properties. Also leveraging our relationships with our local auto manufacturers, facilitating ride and drive events, participating in US Drive, which is a Department of Energy-led partnership effort focused on advanced automotive and energy-related infrastructure technology research and development, and also proactively trying to identify potential site hosts. So working with our commercial and industrial customers to try and gauge interest in deploying charging infrastructure. So as DTE again starts to entertain pilots of different flavors, we know who might be interested in them, and we can get them to market as quickly as possible. So in doing this, again, we do have some kind of principles that are guiding what we're looking into. So we want to, again, help customers realize the benefits of electric vehicles. We want to make sure that we can efficiently integrate that load with the existing distribution grid. An example of that, DTE currently has an electric vehicle time of use rate that facilitates a reduced rate if you're charging your vehicle after 11 p.m. But at certain levels of adoption, if we have every electrical vehicle owner out there starting to charge at 11 p.m. on the dot, so then that becomes essentially a new peak load event for us, which then creates its own challenges. So we have to continuously think about ways, again, to potentially stagger that in the future, and again, make sure that this is incorporated in the grid in a way that isn't going to just create additional infrastructure costs down the line. Again, we want to reduce barriers to adoption, such as range anxiety, and do so by participating in infrastructure deployment through thoughtful partnerships. And so again, the things that we keep asking ourselves as we move forward, how can we educate our customers on the benefits of electric vehicles and spur PV adoption? Again, how can we design rates that properly reflect the cost of service and rewards behavior that minimizes the grid impact? What can we do to manage charging equipment, including both installation and smart charging applications to, again, minimize the impact to the grid and ensure that the benefits associated with electric vehicles accrue to all customers? And should we invest in and support charging infrastructure deployment? I think this consideration has already shifted, and it's not should we invest in, it's just, again, how do we invest in and what is the right model of doing so?
Okay, great. Thanks. Everybody give him a round of applause. All right, next up is Alex Keros. He works on urban mobility for General Motors and serves as Maven's Smart City Chief. And I think he'll say more about Maven, but it's kind of a startup within GM. In this role, he's responsible for Maven's engagement with local communities to collaboratively reimagine mobility in the urban environment. Alex is focused on current initiatives like deploying Chevrolet Bolt EVs into Maven's short-term rental program, into Maven Gig, and as well as actively piloting new mobility platforms that communities and General Motors can collectively learn from and grow into sustainable solutions for all stakeholders. Alex earned his BS in natural resource management here in Ann Arbor, and also has a master's from the business school here at the University of Michigan.
Yeah, sort of fun for Charles and I, because I think go back 12 years, 13 years. Charles was one of my mentors in the Urban Institute, so it's fun now sitting on this side of the fence, if you will. So, most importantly, thank you to everybody who came out tonight. Cold, dreary nights. The snow's coming once again. You could be doing other things, so thanks for letting us talk to you and share what's in our mind. First, I'll take this in a little bit different direction. First, let me say, every day I've spent at GM, I've done it on the electrification front. So it's been both vehicle and infrastructure, heavy infrastructure reliance. But I really have looked at electrification within GM for a long time, and now recently I'm looking at it from a more general mobility point of view. And so I do want to stress, you don't always have to take a car, right? Active mobility is probably always the best, and I think GM's starting to appreciate more and more our space in the mobility spectrum. But when you do drive, I think you'll get a sense from my presentation. Electrification and an electric vehicle makes a lot of sense. But first, a mobility story, and I think maybe to emphasize one of Bruce's points, I got two kids. One is Andrew, and Andrew's 6 years old, and Brianna just turned 5, so they're about 18 months apart. Andrew's going into first grade. What happens when you're going into first grade? The summer there, you got to learn how to ride a bike, right? So my wife took on the challenge of teaching my son on how to ride a bike, and it took, I will say, 2, 3, 4 months to really get Andrew on his way. And I remember that moment in the park, and it was a great moment. Andrew's proud. I'm sure you guys are all remembering your own moments at this point, and it's neat. And to see all of a sudden within, seconds, like, oh, shit, I have all this freedom now, right? Which is it's great as a kid, crappy as a parent, I guess, on one hand. But you're just enormously proud of him, and you see how bright he is. Well, he's a typical firstborn, right? He's, slow, nervous, but bright, and make it happen. And what ends up happening is his sister comes along, and she's like, take the training wheels off my bike. And she's exactly the opposite. I look at my wife, and I'm like, do not take those training wheels off her bike. And she looks at me, and it's like, oh, why not? And so, a good husband and wife fight. And I'm like, just give Andrew a couple weeks at least, Suffice it to say, as a good husband, I acquiesce. Brianna's riding her bike on her own without training wheels within 3 days. So I think what the point sort of being, right, things accelerate fast, especially when it comes to mobility, and especially when it's a reference to your freedom. And so I think that's in many respects sort of what's happening in these days, right, is mobility sort of shifting from, it used to be your license and the keys to a car to a lot of other functions. And so a lot of the things that Charles was talking was, how do we integrate these things, right? Not only your trip when you go see your friends or you go to work, but all the time. And so we're actively involved, and I get really the luxury and the privilege of working within GM to help set the stage about how does mobility, how do we make mobility smarter across the board? If you should be riding a bike, ride a bike. If it's a 5-minute walk, take the 5-minute walk. It's probably both far more healthier for you, and you'll experience your city in a much better way than driving by it on a street. But flip side is, how do we electrify and make the transportation that does have, we'll say, 4 wheels or more sustainable overall? So things are changing, and they're changing fast around us. And I was just having a conversation. Somebody was asking me, why do you think this autonomous stuff is happening? And I guess a part of me realizes that, there's a lot of disruption, and we don't want to go through bankruptcy again. I was a part of it. It was not fun. It's quite embarrassing, frankly speaking. I know you people probably knew somebody involved in it. But at the same time, Waymos and Ubers and all these non-traditional players, I think, helped shape decisions within the boardroom, all for the better. And so we are in a much different world. And when we talk to cities, it's really about how do we start to think in a different way. So this is a word map. The biggest sort of thing that jumps out at me is that really sort of cheesy word down. The co-creation view of this is how do we start to think of it more holistically with the people, with constituents, with cities, on how to make it more holistic overall. Again, we got really 25 really good charging spots within the city. Adding more makes some sense, but how do we add more, and what are the future waves of transportation that might impact the way we add more infrastructure in this space? Bottom line, though, connectivity is foundational to this. And a lot of millennials are very comfortable giving away their location. Most of us in this room do this all the time now. But truth of the matter is, finding out how to be connected is going to be foundational. I mean, one of my mentors within GM, he likes to say it's the ether in which all of this mobility space is working in, right? GM's had 20 years of experience with OnStar. Certainly we're leveraging it a lot more these days. But how do we make all of these things happen so that mobility, electrification, all those things ultimately are much better for folks? There's no secret, our CEO has come out and talked about zero emission vehicles and our commitment to it, 20 new models, but more importantly, how those new models really interact in their environment, right? Zero deaths, zero congestion overall. So a lot of time has been spent. The Bolt TV, while it is available today and has competitors in this space, it's really meant to redefine mobility. It was designed with mobility in its sort of DNA with our autonomous vehicle programs, but also really designed to be a vehicle that anybody could get into. Small on the outside, big on the inside, so that really could create some applications, and I'll talk a little bit more about it at the end here. So I'll talk a little bit about the business of Maven. Maven, really cool. Almost 2 years ago to the date, we launched in Ann Arbor. And Maven really is our shared use platform, leveraging that connectivity and opportunities that we have overall. It really builds on a lot of core competencies within GM, but more importantly, bringing new people to GM, much like electrification. I'll give you a number. It's not widely known public, but it is a number. 10% of our sales in California were electric this last year. That's a big deal to an audience that what's meaningful to you is we don't sell cars in the coast very well. Yeah. Right? We sell them in the middle of the country, but not on the coast. Not only that, Maven's customer base is about 80% millennial. Chevys, about 15% millennial. So the really good news is electrification is getting at new audiences, mobility and Maven products are getting at new audiences, and that Maven platform is really designed just to be that. I'm going to talk about a couple services here, but really it's more about the services and what other things can be put onto the platform. So there's a traditional in your backyard car sharing program, station-based. Hopefully, are there Maven members in here? Thank you. And really, you're able to leverage vehicles much like a zip car, as an example. Maven Home is a derivative of that as a closed community. Think about Boston. They don't have parking spots in Boston, and so what happens is developers try to figure out, how do I get mobility services in my backyard? And then what I'll talk a little bit more about, because it's really fun data, is Maven Gig, and it integrates a lot of the concepts that you've heard there. It's a short-term rental program for people that want to use a vehicle in a commercial purpose. All of these vehicles are GM representative, so the whole fleet is in each of these services, but more importantly, electrified products are in those services as well. So you can rent a Volt today in Ann Arbor, as was alluded to. Similarly, if you want to go drive on Uber and Lyft, you can actually go rent a Maven Bowl TV from us in 6 different cities. This is really about the seamless experience. I won't get too much into this since I'm a long talker. I just said this really about a diverse set of portfolio, really meant to leverage our core competencies overall, but also how do we start electrifying the fleet. What we hear about from a lot of our drivers is, I use the Volt on my errands during the week, and then when I take my trip to Traverse City, I pull out the Tahoe, which is sort of a better way than just having a Tahoe all the time, right? So this is a neat way to start to think about it. And really what the benefits of what we're trying to do with Maven is make it feel like an ownership experience, right? All the bells and whistles, as soon as you plug in your cell phone into the car, becomes your car. And another neat thing is, this is your key fob now. So you actually don't carry around keys, because keys cost a lot to manage. You actually walk up to the phone in the car know it. And we're leveraging some technology that we have on OnStar, a really neat, seamless experience for you to walk up, reserve a car, unlock the door, jump in, press the start button, walk away. And now you don't have to figure out where your keys are anymore. Here's in your backyard what's happening. A real neat, we went from 10,000 members at the beginning of last year to 110,000. So a real nice, when you're thinking about a growth curve overall for the company, Maven's done a great job. We're really meant to be sort of thoughtful in the way we grow. So our goal isn't growth. Our goal is, how do we make this work for the constituents that are working? In Ann Arbor and Detroit, we got some neat services actually between here, downtown Detroit, and the airport. So the cheapest way to get to the airport, promise me, is actually a rental of a Maven that gets you to the airport. I think it's $5 for a half an hour, and then you get free parking there. So some neat things, a lot of different community engagements in the backyard here. As was alluded to, I'm near and dear to my heart in this backstage, but really figuring out how do we work within the community in this space. And then, because I'm talking fast, I apologize. I did want to get here. One of the neatest parts of trying to think about the system and make it holistic is our Maven Gig deployment. So at the beginning of February last year, we started putting Bolt EVs into that short-term rental program. And so what this was people who wanted to participate as Uber, Lyft drivers, or package delivery could come to us and rent the vehicle for an all-in price. So this included, the insurance, this included maintenance, this included access to the EVgo network and for the Bolt EVs. And what was neat about it was none of them really have experience with EVs, so they're new to the EV fleet. And similarly, what we started thinking about is a really great way to expose people in the back seat of the car, right? So we're often told we're not trying to sell these cars. Fair enough. I think that's not true, but nobody ever at a Chevy meeting I ever heard said, let's not sell them. But how do we get more exposure in a better way? And what ends up happening, we create this program, and roughly 300 cars these days and counting, we're continuing to grow it, have put 5 million EV miles on. These drivers are driving 125 to 130 miles per day. These are people that don't have access to charging at home, completely, dependent on public infrastructure. We talked about its challenging business case. That's 53,000 DC fast charging events. And to put it into perspective, a retail Maven Bolt charges on the public DC network once a month. These guys charge once a day. So you're creating a business case associated with infrastructure that really has not been there. And what's neat is they're complementary, right? As we can put these vehicles out here, help build the business case associated with infrastructure, and get all these exposures and different things happening. But at the same time, really create exposure, but real good EVMT in places where we need to do it in shared use. So it's a really neat, 1.5 million kilowatt hours is 1.2 gigawatt hours. And these numbers are just absolutely staggering. We did not believe it. So we're growing this fleet. We're growing this fleet to several thousand now in the Maven platform to figure out how to electrify. And the other neat thing, like I said, is while Model 3 is still ramping up, we've put 400,000 people, roughly the same number, right? 400,000 people in the backseat of this car. And it's not us trying to sell them the car. It's like Bruce's and other folks out there who are on our behalf trying to say, this is a great experience. You should go try it. And so this is a neat little aspect, I think, to what we're trying to do and think about this holistically overall. This takes a village. I won't go there, but it's obvious. Charging infrastructure and figuring out that, working with DT and other utilities. We're just on the phone with his vice president, a week ago, trying to figure out how do we put these programs into place. And most importantly, doing it actively within cities in a way that cities want it to be done, I think is really the key in all of this. So there's a lot of pieces that come together holistically, and I think we're actively, and like I said, I'm privileged to be able to think about how all these pieces come together, avoiding range anxiety, right? Range anxiety doesn't exist in my Maven Gig fleet, which is crazy. They figured it out. How do I now translate some of that into a broader thing, but really build on a lot of the different pieces, including data and other aspects of it. So I talk fast. I know I had a lot of slides. I apologize. Hopefully I kept some of you awake. But I appreciate the opportunity. Looking forward to questions at the end.
Thank you, Alex. And last but not least is Terry Richards, who is not only an old friend of mine as well, but presently part of the customer engagement team for Mahindra GenZe. Terry's worked with several different companies on both 2- and 4-wheel electric vehicles over the years. He did a 30-year stint with Chrysler that included 3 different electric minivan programs, as well as the GEM neighborhood electric vehicle and an electric scooter company. His own home-built electric motorcycle and farm tractor have been on display over the years at the Mayor's Green Fair, so you may have seen him there.
We'll see you there.
And his little Mitsubishi My EV has made 2 round trips to be on display at the Midwest Renewable Energy Fair in Stevens Point, Wisconsin. Now, just kind of grasp taking this little car that only has 60 miles.
The thing has a 60-mile range. And I drove it all the way to Stevens Point, Wisconsin, through, up to Ludington, and then I crossed on the coal-fired ferry, which negated everything positive that I did.
But he'd made
It's 8 stops.
and he lived to tell about it.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Terry.
Thank you. I know every barmaid from Lansing, Grand Rapids, Muskegon, Ludington, all the way up. Anyways, so I'm going to tell you a real quick story before we get started here. About 1898 was one of the first land speed records set by an automobile, which happened to be electric. And I believe it was on one of the beaches in Florida, and this thing got recorded at 30 miles an hour. In 1898, that was good stuff. So anyways, they interviewed the driver, one of the local newspapers interviewed the driver after it was over, and asked the question, do you ever think one of these 4-wheeled vehicles will ever hit a mile a minute? And the driver thought about it and said, no man could survive that speed. So I routinely break 60 miles an hour in honor of that driver. I work for GenZe. GenZe is right here in Ann Arbor. As you can see by the slide, we build 2 different things. They're both 2-wheeled vehicles. The one to the left is a moped. Mopeds will do 30 miles an hour and no faster, but 30 miles an hour in an urban situation is pretty good. It goes 30 miles to a charge. The neat thing about both the GenZe and the bicycle, those battery packs are removable. You don't have to worry about a charging station. If you commute back and forth to work on one, you unclip the battery, you walk it into your cubicle, and you plug it into 110 volts, and 3.5 hours later, it's charged. It's charged by lunch, and you plug it back in. The bicycle does what the law allows. It does 20 miles an hour, and it has a 20-mile range. And the bicycle is under $2,000. Jim, we sell these in several different ways. We actually do sell them through Best Buy. You can buy them, online if you want. We do have a dealership network. Jim, will you raise your hand back there? Jim is the guy that we all love. Jim is of Human Electric Hybrids. He is the electric bicycle guy in Ypsilanti. He is not only one of our dealership and service people, but he also sells kits and and does service for other bikes as well. So I want to give a shout out to him. Origins of Mahindra. We are a small company under Mahindra. Mahindra in the 1945-1946 signed up with Fraser Nash and started building Willys Jeeps in India. It has since grown to be one of the biggest companies in the world. Mahindra, you may have heard of them here in the United States. They do farm tractors. They are the #1 farm tractor company in the world. I don't know who's second. I'm not worried. GenZe customers, as you look at these vehicles, it's all of the above. College, I love the bicycles because if I was going to college, I like the fact I can leave this thing at the bottom of the dorm, I can go to class, and I can lock it up in a bicycle spot. I don't have to worry about a parking structure. I don't have to worry about, some huge spot that, you need to fit a full car in. The moped's a little different. Ann Arbor is very wonderful with mopeds. They have their own little private spots they can park in any of the parking structures. So again, you're not searching around for space. The bicycles, again, are cool because I love pulling up in front of the coffee shop and leaving it there. I don't have to leave it anywhere else. This is where we're actually building the bikes. This is, we like to say, imported from Ann Arbor. It is Ellsworth and Stone School Road is where you'll find this place. We have about 35 employees there. We also have employees in California. So, they're built by us. Cases and benefits. I'm going to stop right at this slide because I want to bring up an interesting point. So you're looking at these scooters and mopeds. I just want to give you an idea. On the bicycle, and this will make sense in a minute, the battery pack itself is 310 watt hours. Now, no one knows what that means, and I understand that. We're going to switch that to another engineering term, which is dollars. If you go 20 miles on that battery pack, you have used up roughly 300 watt hours. You do that 3 times, you've gone 60 miles. 60 miles comes up to just under 1,000 watt hours. That's a kilowatt hour. When you buy that kilowatt hour from these guys over here, that's a dime. You have gone 60 cents, or you've gone 60 miles on a dime's worth of electricity, and nobody's telling you this.
Not in the UP, though.
Well, UP is another story. UP, what you do is you put up solar panels and ignore their utility company. And so just to give a little comparison here, that's the bicycle. The scooters are, it's a 1.6 kilowatt hour pack to go 30 miles. Basically what that means is 16 cents to go 30 miles on the scooter. You're going a little bit faster, but that's what it's costing you. And again, park anywhere. Now, just a little bit of comparison here. My little Mitsubishi that we joked about earlier, and believe me, I joke about it all the time. It's a 15 kilowatt hour battery pack, very small for an electric vehicle. It goes 60 miles. What that comes out to is $1.50 to go 60 miles. So when you buy gasoline at $2.75 a gallon to go 20 miles, you know, you might want to ponder this. And oh, by the way, no oil changes on any of these. So literally no maintenance. When you only got an electric motor that has 2 bearings, you know, it doesn't break. It just keeps running and running. The other reason we're all here is because of the invention of lithium-ion batteries, which started about 1996. None of us would be here without those right now. We are now looking at Tesla battery packs that are making close to 400,000 miles on a pack before it degrades 20%. You will never change that battery in the car. BMW is now expecting a 15-year life expectancy on their battery packs. You will never change that battery pack in the car, you know, unless you have, you know, one cell that goes bad. But the battery pack will outlive the car. So keep that as a thought. And they're 100% recyclable, by the way. Interesting thing about lithium ion, then I'll get back to this. When we used to talk about lead acid batteries. Everyone knows their lead acid battery in the car weighs about 25 pounds. 90% of that's lead. When you talk about a lithium ion battery, you're talking one teeny little bit of lithium in the electrolyte. The rest of that battery is plastic, mylar, and graphite. You know, it's all recyclable. One of the things that GenZe is doing is we are part of rideshare programs. As you know, with Maven, you can, you know, pick up the vehicle, pay a fee, and drive away. We're in the Bay Area. Ford is coming out with an electric bike share program. You will see our GenZe bikes as part of the rideshare program there. Also in the Bay Area is Scoot. Scoot is a ride-share program. If you live in the Bay Area, it costs you nothing to join Scoot. If you come in from out of the Bay Area, you're flying in and you want to cruise around in San Francisco, pay a $79 entry fee to Scoot, hop on a bike. Bikes are $3 to $5 an hour, 10 cents a minute after that, so it's like $6 an hour after that. And you don't necessarily have to drop it off at the same place you picked it up at. Hop on, have a good time. We have over 4 million miles now of Scoot miles. So one of the other things we're doing, Postmates is kind of the Uber of food delivery. And they are now buying a lot of our bicycles as fleets. So you can order your food, pay an extra $4, and a GenZe bicycle or GenZe bicycle or a scooter will drop the food off at your front door. I think the only other thing I've got to add to this is, like I say, Jim sells both the scooters as well as the bicycles. We've got 2 out in the lobby that you can look at as well. There was one other piece of info here. Bear with me here a second. Just so you know, this came from the Dive Brief. The Dive Brief is a utility magazine. If you live and breathe utility companies, this is the magazine that sits on your coffee table. More than 72 gigawatts of new wind generation will come online. 43.5 gigawatts of solar will be expected as well. That's 116 gigawatts of utility-scale renewable energy is expected to be installed by the end of 2020. Just to give you an idea what a gigawatt is, 1.1 gigawatts is one nuclear power plant. We are adding 116 gigs of power. That's renewable. That will happen by 2020.
All right, thank you so much. Let's give a big hand to our panel.
This program was recorded on January 11th, 2018, at the Ann Arbor District Library.